Dr. Dale McKinley is Research and Education Officer with the International Labour Research and Information Group and joins us now for a discussion. Thank you so much for your time on the late edition, Dr. McKinley. Perhaps let's look at government's efforts to mitigate what many have called a ticking time bomb. Now, many have termed it this for a long time. Let's talk about now government's efforts, and many have said this is a little too late. What's your take?
Hi, Lucy, and hi to the listeners. Look, I think in some ways it's a bit of political posturing because people are jumping on the bandwagon here in relation to this food poisoning. It's not surprising. Sorry, Lucy, I'm sorry, but the technical issues here. Someone is speaking in the background from your technical team, and I cannot hear myself. I'm sorry.
Much apologies for that, Doctor. We'll get our house in order and sort that out, and I'm sure they're hearing us as well as we continue with this conversation. And you were still actually making your point there. Continue.
Yes, what I was going to say was I was saying that I think there's a bit of political posturing going on, but it's good in some ways that the SIU is coming on board because given the past issues with relation to these kinds of investigations and everything else, and money being poured, as they mentioned, from the COVID-19. It's good that they're overseeing this, or they're saying that they're going to try to see that it's done properly and that it's done so. But I think in many cases this is a question of a little too much too late in some cases, because this issue has been going on for quite some time. I mean, if we look back at the listeriosis crisis, where over 98 people died, I mean, I think the body count now is about 20 from relation to this food poisoning. And from that time, which was several years ago, there was very little that was done to investigate issues of storage of food, whether or not poisons were being involved, what was happening, regulations, not just of Spaza shops, but of factories, of distributors, and so forth. So it's long overdue. That's a good thing. But it seems to me that in some ways this is a case of a little bit of political, as I said, political posturing going on.
And just to latch on that as well, Dr. McKinley, some have actually said this is a societal problem which might have been caused by the effects of inequality and poverty that we're currently seeing right now, and fixing it will take a strong political will and also have hands on deck. Would you agree with this statement?
Yes, of course. And I think at the heart of this is our regulatory authorities. We have a lot of good laws. We have a lot of good intentions in relation to, we have a lot of investigations, a lot of reports that come out, a lot of recommendations that come out, but very little implementation and regulations. And what that requires is that our regulatory authorities be properly resourced and properly capacitated. In this case, it's the health department in particular that needs to up its game. We know from our own province here in Gauteng that there are serious problems with governance as well as corruption within our Department of Health, and also the Department of Trade and Industry. And those departments need to. We have very few labor inspectors, for example, looking at conditions, working conditions. We have very few health department inspectors, and it's taken this now. These people dying in this crisis for government to start being seen to be acting. But it's a longer-term problem in which our regulatory authorities have been somewhat hollowed out. And so we have a lot of noise and we have a lot of activity and a lot of statements, but we have very little action. And just how practical is this solution now when we look at the front of registering these Spaza shops? I mean, we've seen and heard reports so far of some shop owners that have been reported to be aiding and abetting foreign shop owners in the whole registration process. And is this process a process that is feasible, and not just a solution, but a solid solution moving forward to really curb this? No, I don't think it's a solution, and I think it's too hurried. I mean, we've had this problem and there have been challenges within the informal economy for many, many years. Challenges with not just health issues, but registration issues, adherence to bylaws, and so forth. To give just a very short space of time, in other words, less than 2 or 3 months, for possibly tens of thousands of people, whether South Africans or foreign nationals, to register is setting things up for failure. Because what's going to happen, and what is already clear, the deadline is next week, is that most people have not been able to register. And according to our own government statistics, the vast majority of those are not South Africans. So all of this, there's a lot of noise about, this is going to be replacing, South Africans must be put into place as opposed to foreigners, must be given control of the township economy, but it's not being thought through in terms of how that should happen and how it should be equal in the context of people who are foreign born but who have the right documentation, who have business registration, who are relevant and who need to be supported as well. Because our laws do not discriminate according to one's nationality. It's a question of whether you are legal and a question of whether you're documented. So government needs to think through this and not adopt particularly sort of rushed solutions in this case. And I'm afraid that in the case of this, what we're going to have to go back to the drawing board, because my sense is that in a couple of months they're going to figure out that there's going to be still a lot more potentially illegal or a lot more, shall we say, unregistered shop owners. And we don't have the capacity. The police don't have the capacity. The Department of Health doesn't have the capacity to go around policing every single township in this country to enforce those laws. So they need a proper strategic plan, and I think that has yet to come.
And perhaps if we were to hypothetically maybe just explore some solutions, Dr. McKinley, because part of us also having this chat is to ideally also just find out how we could possibly navigate this, looking at also the importance of the township economy and how it also contributes to the betterment of the lives of people.
Sure. So I think the first step would be for government to hold meetings with all of the shop owners. Both for example, there are foreign-owned shop, the Somali Shop Owners Association. There are the South African Spaza Shop Association. There are many, many local development forums. There are many business forums at the local level. Bring people on board. First step. Talk to them. Talk about what is necessary, what is needed, how they can work together in doing these things, and then also bring all the departments, form an interministerial task team that can then look at each of the potential aspects of these kinds of things. Also, bring in the Department of Trade and Industry in terms of small-scale business support, because many of the complaints, particularly from South African small-scale businesses, is they don't receive the necessary support. Bring that in so that you can have capital, that $500 million you mentioned. How is that going to be spent? Set it out so that we don't have another situation, another plan where you have bureaucrats and officials coming in, manipulating according to buddy-buddy systems or their own preferences, having corruption and having no oversight. So I think you start from the ground, you start from where people are, you form the task teams, you bring in the budget, and then you set out a plan over a period of maybe a year or 2 years, and with also legislative possible changes that are necessary to make sure that you regularize that plan. I think that would be a start. I don't see a great deal of that right now. What we do see is again, quite a few plans that don't seem to be coming together and people working at cross purposes, but a lot of activity happening, but not a strategic integrated plan across ministries, across local and national and provincial governments as well.
Doc, listen, I must thank you so much for your time and insights this evening. That's Dr. Dale McKinley, Research and Education Officer with the International Labour Research and Information Group. Thanks very much indeed.